Don't ever return here, my parents said. Their voices cracked through the cold air like gunfire. I still remember the snow melting on my eyelashes as I walked away, backpack half-zipped, heart torn between fury and fear. Stay with me till the end, because what happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and survival. The snow was falling hard that evening in Hollow Creek, the kind that silences everything but your own heartbeat. I stood on the porch of the house I grew up in, shaking, staring at my parents through tears that froze before they could fall. Darius Monroe, my father, looked at me like I was a stranger. My mother, Marlene, wouldn't even meet my eyes. Her arms were folded tight, her lips trembling, but her words were cold. You should have kept your mouth shut, Talia, she said. You ruined everything. I had only told the truth. I had exposed something dark, something my father had done that could no longer stay buried. But instead of standing with me, my parents turned on me, saying I'd destroyed our family's name. They said I was ungrateful, selfish, and reckless. I tried to make them understand that I didn't do it out of hate. I did it because it was right. But my father's face hardened. You've made your choice, he said. Now live with it. My fingers gripped the strap of my backpack, knuckles white. I could feel the sting of snowflakes on my cheeks as I turned toward the road. Behind me, my mother's voice rose in anger and heartbreak. Don't ever return here, Talia. Do you hear me? Don't ever come back. I froze for just a moment. The streetlight flickered, and the wind howled through the trees. I wanted to scream, to beg them to see me, not as a mistake, but as their daughter who only wanted honesty. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered the last words they'd hear from me. One day, you'll wish I never listened to you. Then I walked away. Each step into that storm felt heavier than the last. My shoes sank into the snow, my breath turning to clouds in the air. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The cold bit into my skin, but it was nothing compared to the ache inside me. As I reached the edge of town, I turned once more to look at the faint glow of our house through the falling snow. For a moment, I almost went back. But then I remembered the way my mother's voice had cracked. Not from love, but from anger. And I kept walking. That night, Hollow Creek disappeared behind me. And with it, the girl who once believed family meant safety. Cleveland wasn't kind that winter. The city lights looked beautiful from a distance, but when you were sleeping in your car, beauty didn't keep you warm. I parked behind an old grocery store most nights, wrapping myself in every piece of clothing I owned, praying the engine wouldn't die. Each morning, I woke with my fingers numb and my heart heavier than before. I told myself it was temporary. It had to be. Days blurred together. I showered at gas stations, ate crackers and coffee for breakfast, and walked around pretending I had somewhere to be. I tried to apply for jobs, but no one wanted to hire a girl with no address. One night, after walking for hours, I stumbled upon a flickering neon sign that read Carter's Diner, open all night. Something about the warm light spilling through the windows pulled me in. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and pancakes. The man behind the counter looked up, Reese Carter. He was maybe in his late 40s, with silver in his beard and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much but still cared. You look frozen, sweetheart, he said softly. Sit down before you fall over. I hesitated, but hunger won. He poured me a cup of coffee without asking for a dime. When I finally told him I was looking for work, his brow lifted. You ever wait tables before? I nodded, even though the only thing I'd ever waited for was forgiveness. He smiled anyway. All right, you start tonight. That diner became my lifeline. The floors creaked, the lights buzzed, and the heat sometimes went out, but to me it felt like hope. The regulars were rough around the edges, truck drivers, night nurses, and lonely people looking for warmth. But they treated me like I belonged. Reese was patient and gentle, teaching me how to balance trays and listen when customers poured out their problems. He never asked too many questions about where I came from. Maybe he saw the pain I was trying to hide. The nights were long but peaceful. When the clock struck 2, I'd wipe down the counter and pull out my little black notebook. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written to Amari, my baby brother. He disappeared the same week I left Hollow Creek. Every word I wrote to him carried a piece of me I couldn't say out loud. I told him about the diner, the snow, the people who smiled at me without knowing why I flinched sometimes. I promised him I'd find him one day. Reese caught me writing once and asked who Amari was. I told him, someone I miss. He didn't push further, just nodded and said, some people are worth missing. For the first time in months, I started to feel something close to peace. Maybe I'd finally escaped the ghosts of my past. But the truth was, Hollow Creek still lived in my chest. And no matter how far I ran, it was only a matter of time before it found me again. It was a slow afternoon at the diner, the kind where the clock moved too slow and the coffee went cold before anyone could finish it. Reese was in the back fixing a leaky pipe, and I was wiping down the counter when the mailman dropped off a small bundle of letters. Most were bills or advertisements, but one envelope caught my eye. My name, Talia Monroe, was written in a shaky, familiar handwriting. I froze. No one here knew that name except Reese, and even he didn't know my full story. The return address made my stomach twist. Hollow Creek. My hometown. The place I swore I'd never see again. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The letter began simply. Talia, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but you need to know. It was from Selena Brooks, my old best friend. We'd grown up together, shared secrets, dreams, and heartbreaks, until the night everything fell apart. I hadn't heard from her in years. She wrote that my father, Darius Monroe, was gravely ill. The doctors didn't think he'd make it through the winter. My heart went still. I thought I'd feel anger, but instead there was a hollow ache I didn't expect. She said he'd been asking for me, though she didn't know why. Then came the part that made my chest tighten. Selena mentioned someone else, Jordan Hale. The name alone was enough to make me feel sick. He was the one person I'd promised myself to forget. The boy who once swore he loved me, then betrayed me in the worst way possible. According to Selena, Jordan had been asking around town about me, asking where I was, if I'd ever come back. She didn't know his reasons, but she warned me to be careful. By the time I reached the end of the letter, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. My past, the one I had buried so deep, had found a way to crawl back to me. I could almost hear my mother's voice again, cold and sharp. Don't ever return here. I wanted to rip the letter apart, burn it, pretend it never existed. But I couldn't. I sat there staring at it, the diner around me fading into silence. The smell of coffee, the sound of rain hitting the windows, it all blurred. All I could see was that familiar name, Jordan Hale. Finally, I walked to the trash can, crumpled the letter, and threw it away. My chest felt heavy, my mind spinning. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. That none of them did. But that night, when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed I was back in Hollow Creek. Snow was falling hard, and I could hear a small voice calling through the wind, soft, desperate, and familiar. Talia, help me. It was Amari, my brother's voice, the one I hadn't heard since the night I left. The bell above the diner door jingled, and I looked up from the register. The night shift had been quiet, just a few truckers, some college kids, and the usual hum of the coffee machine. But when I saw who stepped inside, the air in my lungs turned solid. Jordan Hale. I hadn't seen him in 5 years, but I'd know that face anywhere. He looked older, hair shorter, jaw sharper. But his eyes were still the same deep brown that once convinced me to believe in promises. The same eyes that watched me walk away after everything fell apart. He hesitated before walking closer, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. Hey Talia, he said softly. You look different. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the cloth I was holding until it nearly tore. The last time I'd seen him, my whole life had collapsed. He was part of that collapse. He sat at the counter, clearing his throat. I came to talk. Just for a few minutes. I finally found my voice, quiet but sharp. You shouldn't have come here. I know, he said. But I need to explain what happened. Back then, your dad, he made me do things. Say things. You have to understand, I didn't have a choice. I laughed under my breath, bitter and low. You always had a choice, Jordan. You just didn't choose me. He winced. I know, and I've lived with that. But your father, he wasn't who you thought he was. He told me to make sure you kept quiet about that charity stuff. Said if you didn't, things would get ugly. He was scared you'd ruin everything. My stomach turned. You're saying he threatened you? Jordan nodded, eyes darting to the floor. He used me, Talia. And I let him. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I just thought you should know. He's sick now. Maybe he's trying to make things right, maybe not. But there's more you don't know. Things that could clear your name. I stared at him, unsure whether to believe a word he said. I wanted to yell, to tell him to leave, but before I could, Reese came out from the kitchen. He wiped his hands on a towel and glanced between us. Everything all right here? He asked, his voice calm but firm. Jordan stood up quickly. Yeah, I was just leaving. He reached into his pocket, pulled out some cash, and placed it on the counter even though he hadn't ordered anything. "Take care, Talia." When the door closed behind him, Reese stepped closer. "You know that guy?" "Used to," I whispered. "A long time ago." Later that night, after closing up, I noticed something under one of the booths, a small, glossy photograph. I picked it up, and my heart froze. It was my father, Darius, shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. Between them sat a briefcase half open, stuffed with envelopes. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew one thing: Jordan hadn't come just to apologize. The drive to the small town outside Cleveland was quiet except for the sound of the tires rolling against the wet road. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, knuckles pale against the leather. I hadn't seen Selena Brooks since the night I left Hollow Creek, but after finding that photograph, I couldn't ignore the questions spinning in my head. She was the only person left who might still tell me the truth. When I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown bookstore she managed, she was already standing by the door, arms crossed, eyes wide with surprise. "Talia Monroe," she said, almost breathless. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Neither did I. Inside, the place smelled like old paper and dust. Selena locked the door behind us before we sat down. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. She looked older, wearier, her smile faint but familiar. Finally, I slid the photograph across the table. "I found this," I said. "It's my dad. I need to know what really happened, Selena. All of it." Her fingers trembled as she picked up the photo. "I was hoping you'd never have to know," she whispered. "But I guess you deserve the truth." She told me everything. The charity my father, Darius Monroe, had started years ago, the Amari Hope Foundation, was never meant to help missing children like it claimed. It was a front, a money scheme. Donations that were supposed to go to families were being funneled into private accounts. And after Amari disappeared, Darius used his name to draw sympathy and more money. My chest went cold. "You're saying he used my brother's name?" "His disappearance." Selena nodded, eyes filled with guilt. "Your mom knew too. When you found those papers and took them to the police, she panicked. Darius said you'd ruined everything, and Marlene went along with it. They said you turned against them, but all you did was tell the truth." I couldn't breathe. The sound of my heartbeat filled my ears. The night I left came rushing back, the shouting, the accusations, my mother's face twisted with anger. I thought I'd been the problem, but I'd only been the scapegoat. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, voice breaking. Selena's eyes softened. "Your father was powerful in that town, Talia. People were scared. And when the police didn't press charges, it all went quiet. But now he's sick. Real bad. If you want answers, you need to get them soon. He doesn't have much time." I sat there, numb. My father was dying. And with him, the truth that had destroyed my life was about to disappear. I looked out the window at the gray sky, snow beginning to fall again, just like the night I left. My reflection stared back at me, older, harder, but ready. "I'm going back," I said quietly. "Not to forgive them. To finish what they started." The snow fell thick over the highway, swallowing everything in white silence as I drove toward Hollow Creek. The windshield wipers fought to keep up, but my thoughts were louder than the storm. 5 years. It had been 5 long, bitter years since I'd seen the place I once called home. Every mile closer made my chest tighten. Every sign pointing toward Hollow Creek felt like a warning. When I finally passed the faded, "Welcome to Hollow Creek" sign, I slowed down. The streets looked smaller than I remembered, emptier too. People still walked bundled in heavy coats, but their faces turned as I drove by, their eyes sharp with recognition. Word spread fast in a small town. Talia Monroe had come back. I parked outside the church first. My father's church. The tall white building still stood proudly in the center of town, though the paint had started to peel. I could still hear his voice echoing in my memory. Darius Monroe, the man who preached about honesty and virtue while living behind a curtain of lies. Inside, the warmth of the heater did little to ease the chill running through me. Heads turned when I walked in. A few gasps, a few whispers. Mrs. Turner from the choir clutched her pearls like she'd seen a ghost. I ignored them and kept walking down the aisle toward the front. And then I saw her. Marlene Monroe, my mother, stood near the altar arranging flowers, dressed in her perfect church clothes. Her back stiffened before she even turned. When she did, her eyes went hard. "Talia," she said, my name sounding like poison on her tongue. "You shouldn't be here." I tried to steady my voice. "I just want to see Dad." She shook her head sharply. "He's sick. He can't handle this kind of stress." Stress. I almost laughed. I'm his daughter. Don't I deserve to say goodbye? Her mouth tightened. You made your choice when you left. You brought shame to this family. You don't just walk back and like nothing happened. The room felt smaller with every word she threw at me. I could see the congregation pretending not to listen, their judgment hanging heavy in the air. My throat burned, but I swallowed my pride. Just tell him I came by, I whispered. Then I turned to leave. Outside, the wind slapped against my face. I got into my car, ready to drive away again. But before I could start the engine, someone knocked on the window. It was Selena's cousin, one of the few people who didn't look at me with disgust. She leaned down and slipped a folded note through the gap. Your dad wanted me to give you this, she said quietly before walking off. My fingers shook as I unfolded the paper. There were only 7 words written in my father's handwriting, uneven, weak, but unmistakably his. Meet me by the shed behind the house tonight. My breath caught. After everything, he wanted to see me. For the first time since coming back, I didn't know whether to feel hope or fear. The moon hung low over Hollow Creek that night, silver light glinting off the snow-covered ground. My breath came out in small clouds as I walked toward the old shed behind our house. It looked the same as it had the night I left, weathered wood, broken lock, the smell of cold earth and pine. My heart thudded in my chest, half from anger, half from fear. I hadn't seen my father, Darius Monroe, in 5 years. Now he wanted to meet here, in the dark. When I reached the shed, a faint light flickered from inside. The door creaked as I pushed it open. He was there, older, thinner, his skin pale against the dim lantern light. The once strong preacher looked like a shadow of himself, wrapped in a coat that seemed too big for his frail frame. Talia, he said softly, his voice rough. You came. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, my mind spinning with everything Selena had told me. Why? I finally asked. Why call me back now? He sighed, looking down at his trembling hands. Because the truth should have come from me long ago. I crossed my arms, trying to hold myself together. Then tell me. All of it. He nodded slowly. The charity, the money. It wasn't clean. I let the wrong people in. When the donations started pouring in after Amari went missing, I didn't stop them. I told myself it was for the church, for the community, but it wasn't. It was greed and fear. My stomach twisted. You used my brother's name. You used his disappearance to make money. Tears filled his eyes. I had to. They threatened us. I didn't know how to protect you or Marlene. And Amari, he wasn't kidnapped, Talia. I sent him away. Changed his name. It was the only way to keep him safe. I froze. What? He met my eyes, voice trembling. Your brother's alive. Somewhere out there, he's living as someone else. I've been sending money, making sure he's cared for. But those people, the ones behind the charity, they'd have killed him if they knew he was still here. My knees nearly buckled. For years I'd mourned Amari. I'd written him letters I could never send. And now my father was telling me he was alive? Before I could speak, a sharp voice cut through the night. Darius! Marlene stood in the doorway, eyes blazing. What did you tell her? She shouted. Do you know what you've done? He turned to her weakly. She deserves the truth. No, she screamed. You're killing us all over again. They argued, his guilt against her fury, until his voice suddenly broke. He clutched his chest, eyes wide, gasping for air. Dad! I ran forward, grabbing his shoulders as he collapsed. Somebody help. But Marlene's face twisted in rage and panic. Get away from him, Talia, she cried. This is your fault. Leave now. I ignored her, pressing my hand against his chest, desperate to feel a heartbeat. But all I felt was the cold. The house was quiet the next morning, wrapped in that heavy kind of silence that follows chaos. My father was gone, and my mother hadn't spoken a word since the ambulance left. I stood in the hallway staring at the family photos still hanging on the walls. Smiling faces, matching clothes, the illusion of a perfect life. My chest burned. Every picture was a lie. Something inside me snapped. I needed answers, real ones this time. I knew my mother was hiding more. She always had that look, that cold control behind her eyes. While she locked herself in her bedroom, I searched the study. Papers, drawers, files. It was all there, too organized, too deliberate. Then I saw the small keyhole behind the bookshelf. The family safe. I remembered my father whispering about important church documents being kept there when I was younger. I found the spare key taped under his old desk and opened it. The metal door creaked, and inside, neatly stacked folders sat waiting. At the top was one marked Charity Audit, 2018. I opened it, and my heart stopped. The documents showed forged signatures, mine. Bank transfers under my name, false statements that made it look like I had stolen thousands from the foundation. My mother had framed me. I sank to the floor, clutching the papers in disbelief. Everything came crashing back, the police showing up, the shame, my parents' fury. I'd believed I was the reason our family fell apart, but it was all her doing. Behind me, I heard her voice. You shouldn't have come back. I turned. Marlene stood there, her eyes calm and cold, hands clasped like a woman who had already made peace with her sins. You did this, I said, my voice breaking. You destroyed me. She didn't flinch. I protected what was left of this family, she said. You wanted truth. I wanted survival. Someone had to take the fall. How could you do that to your own daughter? Family sacrifices family, she replied flatly. That's survival. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The woman I'd once called mom wasn't there anymore. Only the mask remained. I gathered the documents, shoving them into my bag. Not anymore, I whispered. You don't get to decide who falls. I stormed toward the door, but a shadow moved outside. Jordan Hale stepped into the light, his coat dusted with snow. Talia, wait, he said quickly. You don't understand. I need those papers. My stomach turned. You followed me? He held up his hands. It's not what you think. I can use them to protect you, to fix this. I didn't buy it. You're still working for her, aren't you? Before he could answer, a familiar voice came from behind him. He is. Reese stood there, eyes locked on Jordan. Your mother paid him to keep tabs on you, to make sure you didn't find the truth. Jordan's face went pale. I stepped closer, gripping the bag tight. Then tell her she failed. And with that, I walked past them both, out into the cold. I didn't sleep that night. The papers lay spread across my motel bed, the evidence of years of lies and betrayal. Every page felt heavier than the last, proof that I wasn't the villain they made me out to be. For so long, I'd carried the shame of their sins. Now I finally had the power to return it where it belonged. At sunrise, I sat in front of my laptop, fingers trembling. I scanned every document, every signature, every forged check, then sent them out, anonymously, to local reporters, the police, and the state's fraud investigation office. No message, no name. Just the truth. Hours later, it started. News alerts lit up my phone. Local charity under investigation. Former pastor accused of financial fraud. Community leader's wife linked to embezzlement cover-up. By afternoon, Hollow Creek was buzzing. People whispered in grocery stores, crowded around televisions and diners, shared posts online. The Monroes, once the town's model family, were now the headline scandal. Marlene's perfect image crumbled fast. Her church board released a statement cutting all ties. Her friends stopped answering her calls. The same people who once praised her crossed the street to avoid her now. I watched from a distance, sitting in my car parked near the old church. Part of me thought I'd feel satisfaction watching it all burn. But as I saw her walk out of the building, shoulders hunched, eyes sunken, I didn't feel triumph. Just emptiness. The truth had cost everyone something, including me. That night, as I packed my things to leave town again, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, from a nearby county. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Is this Talia Monroe? A woman's voice asked. My name is Carla. I'm a social worker from Lansing. I believe we have information about your brother, Amari. The room went still. My throat tightened. What did you say? She spoke gently. We've been reviewing old case files connected to the Monroe charity investigation. A child matching Amari's description was placed in foster care under the name Aaron Miles. We confirmed the DNA matched this morning. He's alive, Talia. My knees gave out. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. After all the lies, all the pain, he was alive. The next morning, I drove to Lansing. My heart pounded the entire way. When I stepped into the office, I saw him, older now, taller, but those same brown eyes. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he whispered, Talia? I ran to him. We held each other like the world had finally stopped spinning. Tears soaked his shirt, and for the first time in years, I felt something pure, peace. Why'd it take so long? He asked through sobs. Because I had to find the truth first, I said, brushing his hair back. And now we can start over, with nothing hidden. Revenge hadn't healed me. But truth gave me my brother back. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes you breathe softer without realizing it. Snow fell in slow, gentle flakes, covering everything in white, just like the night I left Hollow Creek years ago. Only this time I wasn't running. I was saying goodbye. The two gravestones stood side by side, names carved in fading stone. Darius Monroe and an empty space beside him that once belonged to my mother, though no one had seen her since the investigation. Some said she changed her name and fled to another state. Others whispered she couldn't live with the shame. Either way, she was gone, just like him. I knelt in front of the graves, my hands shaking as I set down the old, snow-dusted backpack I'd carried the night I was banished. The fabric was worn, the zipper still half broken, but it held the memory of the girl I used to be, the one who walked into the storm alone, scared but defiant. "I came back," I whispered, voice trembling in the cold air. "But not for you. For me." The words hung there, carried away by the wind. Behind me, I heard the crunch of boots on snow. Reese stood by the car, his coat collar turned up, his breath fogging in the cold. Beside him, Amari held his hand. My brother, alive, safe, and finally smiling again. He waved at me, and I managed to smile back. For the first time in years, the ache in my chest didn't feel like a wound. It felt like healing. I looked back at the graves one more time. I thought about everything that had led here. The lies, the pain, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd ever be more than their mistake. They tried to bury the truth, to make me the villain of their story. But in the end, the truth was the only thing that set me free. "I forgive you," I said quietly, not because they deserved it, but because I did. "I forgive you for what you did, and for what you couldn't be." A gust of wind swept across the hill, shaking snow from the trees. I could almost imagine it carrying my words away, scattering them somewhere beyond Hollow Creek, where they could finally rest. Reese called softly, "You ready?" I nodded, standing up and brushing snow off my gloves. "Yeah," I said, taking one last look at the graves. "I'm ready." As I walked toward the car, Amari ran to meet me, his laughter echoing through the quiet field. I took his hand, and together we climbed in. The engine started, warm air filling the silence. Outside, the first flakes of a new storm began to fall, just like that night years ago. But this time, I wasn't walking into the snow alone. As we drove away, Hollow Creek faded behind us, swallowed by white. And for the first time, I didn't look back. Do you think Talia was right to finally walk away from Hollow Creek and leave her past behind? Or should she have tried to make peace with what was left of her family? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear your take. And if you enjoy emotional stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story.